This morning, I want to go back to the Old Testament with you. I gave him a sermon. I preached in May when Tulleen was in California, and I preached on the book of Ruth, the first chapter of Ruth, which I just loved and was so fun. And in figuring out where God wanted me to go for this Sunday, I landed on the first chapter of 1 Samuel, which is coincidentally right after the book of Ruth. And I didn't start out looking in order of where I had been to where maybe I need to go there next. That just happened to be where God landed me. And so 1 Samuel kind of takes place, if you want to know where that is, it's in the Old Testament. There's the book of Judges, the tiny book of Ruth that's like 2 pages long, and then 1 Samuel starts. And so it takes place, it's a narrative, which I love narratives, I love stories, because it helps me relate to the people in the stories. And 1 Samuel tells a story about a family, a young family. And so it takes place in the time of God's people when it's a really dark time. It's a dark time in the life of God's people. It's a dark time because there's no king. And at the end of Judges, if you remember when I preached from Ruth, at the end of Judges, it says, everybody did what they thought was right in their own eyes because there was no king. And so there were just all these different judges. And so 1 Samuel opens up with this story about a young family. And I'm going to kind of set the stage a little bit before I read the passages because the names are a little strange. And I want you to know who we're talking about before I read the passage. So maybe it'll make more sense to you. So we have Elkanah, who is the husband in this story. Which is a strange name, but he's a husband. All of these people are God's people. So all of these people in our eyes, in our language, would be Christians. So Elkanah is the husband. He marries a woman he loves, Hannah. He marries Hannah. And Hannah can't have any children. I don't know how long they tried for children, but she can't have any children. So Elkanah decides to get another wife, so that he hopefully can have children with her, and her name's Peninnah. So there's Elkanah and his 2 wives, his 2 sister wives, Hannah and Peninnah, and there's another character in the story that's going to be mentioned, and it's Eli. He's a priest, and he's not a very good priest. But so all of these people, Tulleen and I were talking about this morning, all of these people are church people, inside the church people. So as I tell this story, this is not a story about non-Christians or people who don't know God or don't go to church. These are inside the church people. These are all people that know God, know the Word of God, and are doing things to practice their faithfulness to God. So just keep that in mind when we unpack all of this. So I'm going to read now our passage now that you have the characters. There's one more place I want to mention. This family lives like in the mountains. And at this time, there aren't churches everywhere like there are churches here. There's one place that Christians go to worship, and it's in Shiloh. That's where they go worship. And they usually pick up all their stuff, and they have to travel there, and they go one time a year. So in this passage, Shiloh is mentioned and the temple is mentioned, and it's more like a tent. So if you picture this family going to Shiloh to do their yearly sacrificial practices, sacrificing, eating together, giving all of the things that they are supposed to give traditionally to God, this is where this story is really taking place. So 1 Samuel, chapter 1, and I'm going to only read verses 4 through 18. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival, Peninnah, used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore, Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart so sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way, and ate, and her face was no longer sad. So that's our text. And so what just happened is kind of, where we left the stage set here. Elkanah, his family, they're in Shiloh. He has sacrificed whatever calf or bull or whatever it is that they sacrifice, a lamb that they sacrificed to God. And he gives his one wife, Peninnah, her portion and all the kids that she has birthed. But she gives Hannah a double portion. Why? Because he loves her. It says he loves her. So there is something very important about their relationship already that we discover right at the beginning. He loved her. And so after that happens, we see Hannah has completely lost her appetite, because it says year after year after year, they go here, they do this, they sacrifice to God. Peninnah has all her kids, and she's like, So, are you going to pray with your kids tonight? That's right, you don't have any. So she's constantly taunting Hannah about the fact that she doesn't have kids. Are you getting up with your kids to do devotions today? That's right, you don't have any. So she's constantly just digging at Hannah the whole entire time. Anybody experience things like that? You don't have to be struggling with infertility for this to happen, and you don't have to be a woman for this kind of thing to happen. But this is what's happening to Hannah year after year after year, right? This is the scenario. And her sweet, loving husband is, I use that term seriously, but also tongue-in-cheek, because back in this culture, part of the polygamy, let's start here. Polygamy is not ordained by God, first of all. This was not a God idea. This was a human idea that we came up with. So although just like divorce, God allowed it in Old Testament times, he wasn't condoning a man having more than one wife. That doesn't mean that he was okay with that. Just like he's not okay with divorce and a million other things that we do. It happens because we're human. So don't read this and go, see that, that's how things should work out. This is not what he wanted to happen. So because they live in a culture where male sons mean power, prestige, they mean inheritance. This is who has all of the power in this society. It's males. So for you to produce a daughter is a good thing. But for you to produce a son or multiple sons, this is you are the prized female if you're pushing out boy babies all day long, right? So this is a very, very, very important thing in this culture. And so although we find Elkanah and he loves Hannah, they don't have any kids. And he's living in this society where he has to survive, right? And do what they do, so he thinks. So he gets this other wife, Peninnah, has kids with her, and the torture begins, right? I don't know why he didn't expect that, but humans were humans then, they still are now. This is not going to work out for somebody, okay? Because I can't imagine Peninnah, Elkanah, Hannah, all of it, it's, just this really terrible love triangle that's going on. And Hannah is like, thank you for my double portion. I appreciate it. I'm not hungry. I have no appetite. This woman that you have, that you married, my sister wife, is torturing me day in and day out. It doesn't matter that you love me. I feel tortured. I'm in pain. I'm hurting. I feel worthless because in this society, a woman who cannot bear any children, male or female, is worthless. You are at the bottom of the totem pole in this society. So to her and her surroundings, it doesn't matter that she's loved by her husband. Because I was reading this at first, and it's the first time it stuck out to me that I was like, geez, could she just not be happy that she's married to a man that loves her? And she has a home, and she has she goes to church with her family, and her husband kind of dotes on her. She has a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't be complaining about, right? We can see this in her. But the one thing that she wants, I want to have a son. I want to bear a son. And so it says, that she gets up from the table. She's completely distraught. She's brokenhearted. She's just had it. She's at the end of her rope. And she goes to the temple. So she goes to what would be probably a tent. And there's a priest, Eli. And she goes in and she starts praying. And have you ever prayed prayers to where you are praying internally, and your words, your mouth may be moving, but the words are not coming out because you're praying silently? That happens a lot. This is not uncommon for us to talk about here in church today. But I was thinking about that, just how specific it was in the text, and I can imagine that the thing that she's praying for, if you think about it, the thing that she's praying for is for God to give her a son specifically. And it's probably something that she is absolutely embarrassed about, first of all, because who, as a woman in this society, here in this time in history, would want to verbally out loud pray for that, because it even gives more voice to the fact that that's the thing that you can't do or you don't have. That's where your barrenness is. That's where your void is. And so even on top of just I'm in agony and pain, and we can say, I'm praying silently to myself, but I assume she also didn't want to incur any more anguish. She didn't want anyone else to come at her and say something about her barrenness, about her inability to have a son, that she was embarrassed by this fact, and she didn't want to verbalize that out loud. Oh my gosh, if anybody were to hear me praying for this thing, there are things that we would not want to pray out loud that we hope God will do or meet us in that we probably would not say out loud, like Hannah in this story. And so enter Eli, the priest, and before meeting this woman or anything, he's just assumed she's drunk. And just is like, hey, woman, take your liquor and go outside. This woman is desperate, praying. She's in a state that is distraught, which is usually a professional ministry's a person in professional ministry. It's their cue to weep with those who weep, or, pray with somebody, but not just jump to a conclusion about their state of mind and their state of being. But Eli does, bless his heart. Eli, if you read on in Samuel, you learn that one of the first sentences in chapter 2, halfway through chapter 2, it says, now the sons of Eli were worthless. That literally is what the Bible says right there. So, he's dealing with his worthless sons. He's put them in charge of stuff in the church that they shouldn't be in charge of, that they're taking advantage of. They're extremely corrupt, and who knows what the rest of his background is. And he sees this woman preaching, and he's like, all right, let's break it up. Move on, take your liquor, get out the door. And she says, I was weeping bitterly. I'm broken. I'm sad. I'm praying to God. I haven't had a drop of alcohol, I promise. And so he, is like, all right, peace be with you. I hope God give you what you ask for. And so he has a moment of his priestly duties that is a little redeeming. And I can appreciate that. And she goes on to explain what she was praying for, that she was praying for a son. And then it says, then she left. She went and ate. She got her appetite back. And it said her face was no longer sad. So nothing happened in this story. Like God didn't come down and meet her in that moment miraculously and do this. Like we didn't hear or read anything about a miracle that happened in that moment. We didn't, there wasn't an angel of the Lord that came down and said something to her like, you're going to have a son or anything like that, right? She went in, she wept bitterly, she was broken down, she prayed, she had an exchange with Eli, she leaves, she goes eat, and she's not sad anymore. So the question is always, as it should be, and Tullian taught me this, which is always such a great question. Who does God want me to relate to in this story? Where do I find myself in this story? Where do I find Stacie in this story? So where do you find yourself? Out of the characters I've described, where do you find yourself? Are you Elkanah, the husband? Do you find yourself in any way, shape, or form like him? Peninnah, the sister wife? Hannah? Eli, the priest? I discovered in thinking about this and studying it that I find myself in all of them. Every single character in this story reveals some piece of my personality, some piece of my human nature, some piece of my brokenness that comes out at times. And I thought it was funny because, we don't get a full character description of each of these characters, Elkanah, Peninnah, Hannah, Eli. We just kind of get one facet of them in this story. And these are some of God's people. We know that. So they're also emblematic of all of God's people. So that means me and you. It means professing Christians, people who believe in God, that these are emblematic. They exemplify some of the things that we are. So I have found myself like Elkanah, the husband. I love people. Maybe I love someone dearly, but I can't meet them in their pain. I can't understand it, and I can't change it. Have you ever had a relationship like that? It doesn't have to be a spouse. It doesn't have to be anybody in your family even. It can be, a coworker. It can be somebody that you love and care for, and you would do anything for them, but you can't change their circumstances, and you just don't understand what they're going through. And, you're actually, because he is, focused on yourself in this story. And I remember this very vividly, especially in the first, I would say, 2 or 3 years of our marriage, in the early days of our marriage, which we actually just celebrated our 6th wedding anniversary Friday. Tully and I did. Huh? What? You're going to write it down? No, never mind. Yes. Okay. Happy anniversary. So, did you say this? Is that what? Oh, okay, sorry. You're messing me up. In the early days of our marriage, I loved Tullian, but he was going through some things that I could not understand and I could not change. And there were moments where I was like, doesn't the fact that I'm just here with you, loving you, aren't I better than 10 sons? Aren't I better than, doesn't that mean more than if, this thing that you're crying about, this thing that you are lamenting over, this thing that you're heartbroken by? Don't I bring more to the table here? Which is kind of what Elkanah is saying. And that's not the only instance I've found myself like that. There are other people that I've done that with in my life, my own children, people in my family, friends. Like, doesn't that matter? Doesn't it matter that I'm here? Look at, I'm here, I love you. How many of you have said that to somebody? I got some kin in the back. What about Peninnah? Nobody wants to be this girl. But you are, and I am. Peninnah, she gets picked. She looks like she could have babies. I'm going to pick her. She does. She's fertile myrtle here. Peninnah is like, there's like kids all day long. And she is like walking around with her kids, like parading to everybody. Like, yep, I am woman, hear me roar. I mean, in this society, that's a huge thing, like that she has kids and that she can have kids. And so she is by far, like, her whole identity is in the fact of like, this is what I did. So have I found myself taking credit for something, some gift or skill or something I've produced? Have I taken credit for those things before? Because even the fact that her womb was not closed was a gift from God. Even the children that she did birth, God ordained that. Those kids were because God allowed that. God said that this woman's going to have children. But we take credit for things that came from God. And then we can flaunt them in front of other people, showing them what we have and you don't, and what I can do and you can't, and what I produced and you won't ever. We can do that all day, every day. Anybody in your life that you have ever felt competition with? Anybody have a sibling? Anybody have a spouse? Because that's the worst place to find competition, but you do. Anybody have a coworker? Anybody have a classmate that you want to be better than? Your inner Peninnah will come out quick and in a hurry, okay? Because I know mine has, and I'll pray for when yours does, because maybe you guys haven't experienced that yet. But so who can relate to Peninnah? What about Eli? Not all of us are like inside the church and professionals inside the church. I'm not talking about, have you ever been like a ministry leader or anything, but have you ever jumped to conclusion? Ever? Have you ever made a really bad assumption? And we know what assuming does. So we've done this. We've all been Eli, where we're so disconnected from the people around us that are in the room, and maybe even in a space that we should know and care for and be responsible for, our home, our office, our church, our class, whatever it is, our families. We walk into these spaces where we shouldn't be disconnected from what's going on, but we are. And we jump to a conclusion that is completely off. Have you done that? Because I 100% have. 100%. And almost every one of these characters that are in me, I have been in my entire life. So I have like this long list of examples of ways I've been each of these people in different ways, in different settings. And I was like, geez. And then you get to Hannah. Who can relate to Hannah? Who can relate to Hannah? Because Hannah, pretty much, every time I've heard Hannah being preached about, there's a sermon about Hannah, it's faithful Hannah. Faithful Hannah. Pray like faithful Hannah. Be like faithful Hannah. She's become this idol of like how to be and how to pray, and faithful poor Hannah. She's been made fun of. She's, married to this guy who loves her, God forbid. And then she's got this sister wife that's taunting her. But faithful Hannah, faithful Hannah. And I read like over and over and over, and I told Tully, and I said, I'm wrestling with something in here. And I don't think it's really what I was wrestling with was in here. It's what I've heard that's out here. Because I'm like, Hannah is also, not exempt from my darts of like character dissection here. Hannah is going to the temple and she can't eat because she can't have one thing, because she can't do one thing. What is that? Have a son. The woman that's taunting her has what she wants. I want to be her. And I want to be able to do what she can do. And that's all I want. This was not clothed in something super spiritual where, like it says, an angel from the Lord came to Hannah because of her faithfulness and said to her, don't eat, fast and pray. Go to the temple and ask the Lord for a son in your diligent, faithful manner. Go do that, Hannah. There's nothing about that here. It just paints the scene of their whole jacked up, dysfunctional, married family life. And Hannah is like, I am sick of this right here, okay? Like she's done. And I get it. I totally get it. When you want the thing and you're like, I mean, I'm a good wife. I want to have a baby. I want to be a mom. I want to be liked by all the people in society. I don't want to feel like a piece of trash. I want to be lifted up. I want to be lauded as somebody important. I want to be accepted by everyone. Why can't I do this? Like I'm mad at God and I'm going to pray about it. I can't eat. I'm not eating that. Thank you for your double portions. Blah, blah, blah. You love me. I'm going to pray. I mean, like, this is more, I feel like, a true picture of Hannah because I'm like, I don't really see where it was like she's like meek and like sweet and like, I don't know, thank you, honey. Thank you for loving me. Eat my lamb. I'm like, she's not doing that, okay? Like she is like going and she's going by herself and she's like, like I'm going to pray and she's like, her lips are moving and she's crying and I get it. I get this. I get you, Hannah. I get it. Like I would do the same thing. And that's part of the point of this, that we would be all these people, that this is us. And so we're also Hannah. I've been Hannah. I want what the other person has. I want what other people can do. I want to be able to do those things. Why can't I do that, God? Why can't you put me in that place? Why can't I do that? Because if I could do that, my whole life would be better. Life would be easier. I would feel better about myself. I'd be nicer to Penina. My husband would be happy. She wouldn't be as mean as she would. This is also going to help her, God. We're so righteous in our prayers. So I don't know if anybody else has thought that about Hannah, or this whole story. And I was wrestling with that last night. And so as Tullian and I went to sleep, and I was like, so have you read 1 Samuel lately? No, honey, I haven't. I think I did maybe I have. I don't know. I haven't read the text. And then this morning I'm like, I kept talking about it because I needed someone to wrestle with me. And which he did so graciously. But it was a wrestling of like, I'm all of these characters. And sometimes that is comforting to know. And sometimes it's disconcerting. And it makes me feel like I'm a crazy nut. And I'm living around a bunch of crazy nuts. We're all jacked up. So just think about, like who and how you might relate to all of those characters. It may give you some food for thought. I thought about Hannah specifically because I've been in a marriage where I really wanted a child. And I couldn't have a child. But this is not just a story about infertility. This is a story about barrenness in a place that we don't want to be barren. It's a story about void in our lives, in ourselves, that we don't want to have a void. We're searching. What can make me better? What can make me feel better about myself in this situation? How can I fill this void and feel better? What will help? Even in her prayer, she was like, God, give me a son, and I will give him back to you for all of his days. In his hair, where it says, a razor shall not come to his head. this was like a Nazarite thing, not a person from Nazareth, but a God-fearing, believing person. This is traditions of what they believed. This is like saying, I'm not going to shave his head or cut his hair was like a sign of reverence. And like, this is a tradition of theirs, right? So this is like a law. So for her to say, I'm praying for this thing and I'm going to give it back all to you. How many of us pray for something and say at the same time, and I'll give it all to you? I don't. I'll tell you right now, I don't. I don't have a habit of going, God, just please, dear God, let the market change so we can buy a house. Give us a house, and I'll give it all to you. I'll submit it all to you. Ultimately, yeah, we may use our house for ministry in a ton of ways. But what I really want that for, ultimately, is for me. For us. I want to fill some void. Am I content without that? Am I content without them or him or her or that relationship? Am I going to be content, or like, what am I doing with this void, this place that I feel a barrenness in? What do you do with those places? What do you go do or find to fill those voids? What do you do? We do all kinds of things. But ultimately, that's what it's doing. It's this void. She's looking for a son to fill every void that she has, that she knows she has, that she's conscious of what she has. What's so crazy intricate is that we looking back, because the Old Testament, we get to look back on this. They don't know what's coming in the future. They know what the promise is, but they don't have the New Testament to read like we do. So when we look back at this and we see there was a son that was going to come fill every void that you have, Hannah, and you had no idea what you were praying for. You had no idea the plan that I already had, that I closed your womb at this time for a specific reason, and that I opened hers for a specific reason. But the reason I'm going to open yours has to do, yes, with your son that you're going to have. But it's bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that void that we think is the biggest one ever in the history of humanity. Is still nothing compared to the actual void that we have and the actual thing that we need to fill it. And Hannah had no idea that that's what really she's praying for. It was prophetic, and she didn't even know it. And she also didn't know that she would have a son. I believe she believed that she would. But her son, Samuel, who, spoiler alert, she ends up having a boy. She ends up having a son, and his name's Samuel, and he becomes the first prophet. So, not only did she get her prayer answered, which doesn't always happen, and this is not about always getting your prayers answered, but our prayers are always answered, the ones that we should have prayed, or the ones that the depth to the one that we did pray are answered in God's time and in his sovereignty and in his decision. They're answered in the way he deems them to be answered. And so that's not always easy for us to digest. And in her case, it might have been a little easier because she got what she wanted. She got what she asked for. She prayed for her son, and she got one. But ultimately, it's God answering a human prayer of his people. You all need a son, and I'm going to give him to you. You just have no idea how I'm going to do it. This is going to just blow your mind. And that's more for another day. We can talk about that a little more, but I wanted to share something sweet and disconnected, but now connected. And like I said, I've been wrestling with what text to preach from and just study. And both of these things happened at the same time, but were not connected in my head until last night. I have an aunt. I have a few aunts. My mom is the oldest of 5 siblings, and her youngest sibling is my Aunt Mia. And she's only 9 years older than me, I think. My mom had me when she was 15, so that's not like my aunt being 9 years older is not that big of a difference. But so she was more like a big sister to me growing up, my Aunt Mia. I have known her very closely my entire life. And we have been through really amazing things and really awful things together. And last Saturday, so a week ago, while we were in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, Aunt Mia texts me, and this is what she said. And she already asked her permission to read this, so I'm not sharing this without her permission. But she says, "I am texting to ask you and T to pray for me and over me. I cannot fight this battle alone anymore. Sleep hasn't helped my tired, worn-out soul. I am talking to my job on Monday about my options for help. I have lost my love and believe that God will and has been with me. I know that I am the one that left him and can't get back without help. I need him to show me who he wants me to be. I can't fight this life anymore. I need him. I want him most of all." That came Saturday while we were with the group of people in Ligonier, and I stopped in my tracks and I showed Tullian the text. And from last Saturday until yesterday, I spent in a lot of conversation with my Aunt Mia, working through her thoughts and what she wants to do. And she's at a place in her life, and she's had a very, very hard life full of trauma and just hardships. And although our family can be extremely loving and supportive, and they have been of her, and she will be the first to admit that, it doesn't mean life has been easy for her. And so she wanted to find help. And she's not an addict. She lives paycheck to paycheck. She's a single woman. She's divorced. She's been married multiple times. She has 2 grown children. She has grandchildren. And she has a great job. She has medical insurance, but it is so hard to find help, as many of you probably know. And so she's she's at a point where she's like, I have come to the end of myself and my own resources. I cannot do this anymore. I'm undone. And she would rather just go to sleep than wake up. And so all week long, we talked and we looked and we researched and we tried to, figure out the best options, and, continuing to remind her, like, God's going to open a door. God's going to make it happen. He's going to make it clear. Just keep doing your due diligence, exploring your options, talking to your insurance. And if you've had to talk 1 second to your insurance company and you don't speak insurance, that in itself will drive you to a point of needing help and therapy, because insurance is like having to deal with all of that is a nightmare. And so Aunt Mia is doing this all week. She's doing her own due diligence for herself, for her health, to get her help. And Friday night, she found a place. She's going she's packed and cleaned her house and done all the things so she can go for this place of relief and retreat and respite. And Friday night, she sends me this text. She said, "I'm fixing myself a scrambled egg sandwich. It's the first time in a while, but I am ready for bed and sleepy. It's weird, but I feel peaceful." And I thought about that last night. And like Hannah, after my Aunt Mia spent night after night after night, sleepless and tired and bedraggled and distraught and undone and just ashamed and humiliated and just living in this constant turmoil that she's in, all of a sudden she can eat. She hasn't been able to eat. She hasn't been able to sleep. And she feels sad, lonely, depressed, anxious, all these things. And all of a sudden she's like, I'm fixing a scrambled egg sandwich. I haven't been able to eat in a long time. And it's weird, but I feel peaceful. And popped in my head, and I was like, that's verse 18 of my passage here. That's like what I was just studying. In verse 18, which is the last passage I read, it says, then the woman went her way and ate. Hannah could finally eat, and her face was no longer sad. I was like, that is Aunt Mia. Now, nothing changed in Hannah's circumstances, and nothing changed in Aunt Mia's circumstances. What they both did is take their petitions and their pain to God, and they believed, to some degree, that he would help them. Because nothing changed. Nothing has changed. My Aunt Mia's, Friday night, my Aunt Mia's, circumstances had not changed. She actually arrived yesterday at the place that she's going to go. But still, there's nothing that's happened. Nothing has improved yet. There's been no pregnancy found. There's nothing new to birth. So I just was realizing, sometimes when we talk about the things that make us saddest, the most miserable things that are going on in life, that's the best way to ease the pain, is to be able to talk about it. And we always have someone to talk to about it. Even if we don't have a physical person with us, we always can go to God. We can always give him our petitions. We can always trust him to hear us. And he knew them before we mumbled them or we didn't say them out loud and our lips just moved while we wept bitterly. So it doesn't matter if you are sitting on a bar stool in a bar, if you're at the bottom of your shower, if you are in a classroom, it doesn't matter where you are, that you are bringing your petition to God. He hears you. And don't underestimate the power of that making your sadness in some way ease. It may not make it go away, but you may be able to eat again, and you may be able to smile again. You may have a countenance about you that is relieved in some way. And ultimately, God knew and knows today our most empty places, our most void, barren places, whatever those are. And he has already filled them. All we need, we already have in Christ. He already sent the Son that we need. The barren places that we have, he already sent the water that quenches those. The voids that we have, he already filled that space for us. And it's hard to remember that. But we ask God, just like Hannah did, remember me. And when she says remember, that Hebrew word is an action. It's not because he forgot me. It's not that kind of remember, forget. It is like, remember me. Remember to do the thing you said you would. Remember me. Like, be in action for me. And he already has. We can be reminded today that he already did that. He already was there. He already met our void. He already met all of our barren places. There's a current, new, made in 1991 hymn that I found, which was odd because most hymns are much older than that. But it was 4 stanzas of it caught me like right off guard yesterday while I was looking for some stuff to include and close with. And I thought this was perfect. It says, "Come to me, O weary traveler. Come to me with your distress. Come to me, you heavy burden. Come to me and find your rest." And that's what we can do. We can count on that. Even if Hannah wasn't counting on that, that is what we have. We can go to God with our distress. We can go to God with our burdens, and we find rest there. That's what he says. Come to me, all you that are weary, heavy laden. I will give you rest. I got you. I hear you. I see you. And that's what we find in this story today.